Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Sonia, and I come from a family of Portuguese immigrants, some of whom call our president the evil orange man, and some of whom bless the grounds he walks on. While I love to have political conversations at Colby, when it comes to my family, I often stay quiet. It is from our speaker tonight, Mónica Guzmán, however, that I've learned to break political walls down, we must lead with curiosity. Indeed, Mónica Guzmán is the Senior Fellow for Public Practice at the nonprofit Braver Angels, where she works to change not how we view issues, but how we view one another. She's the author of the best-selling book, I Never Thought of It That Way, How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times, and runs a podcast on how we can disagree about politics without losing heart. She is an immigrant and proud liberal daughter of conservative parents, and in a time full of walls, she has inspirationally chosen to build bridges. Tonight, she joins Uma Graz, a government and philosophy double major with a minor in music, and Carol Herney, our associate provost for teaching and learning. Please join me in welcoming our incredible speaker tonight, Mónica Guzmán.
Thank you again for coming, Mónica.
Yeah, this is great. I was telling them that I thought this was a talk, a chat, not a party. This looks like a party. This is so fun.
It's
the food and the tables and man.
It's
anyway,
a bit of a party. And thank you for the work you've already done with a group of faculty and staff earlier today.
Yeah, it was great.
And so the fun continues.
Yes.
We sort of put a little plan together for a few questions to get ourselves launched, and I'm going to start by asking a little bit about something that's kind of near to my heart, which is sort of, the fact that my faculty career began as a biology professor. So I know a lot about the ways that the body works. And so, one of the things I'm intrigued by and want to get your perspective on is how, when we're in these situations where we're really trying to be curious and talk across divide, how do we control some of our natural biological responses? The emotions when things really hit home, So can you give us a little perspective on that from your work? Yeah.
Love that question. Yeah. Since I published this book in 2022, I've learned so much more about somatics and the body and the sensations and how they tell us signals about our emotions and how important it is to listen to those signals. So you use the language, how do you control these impulses? And the flat answer to that is you don't. The first impulse, you don't control. What you can control is your awareness. So there's ways to build up the practice of listening to your body, paying attention to yourself, aiming curiosity within. And when you're in a really tough, heated conversation or you're listening to something on the news that's making you, what does that look like for you is a really great first question to ask. When I get angry, often I just become a stone statue. And people who know me know that. But if you don't know that about me, you might think I'm just kind of being quiet. But I'm fairly outgoing. If I'm being quiet, something is stewing inside of me. So it's about get to know what your body does in certain reactions. And then once you're aware of it in the moment, you get your power back. Because the danger is to be carried away by our reactions. The danger is not to have reactions. We can't avoid having reactions. We're not robots, right? But if you sense, oh my gosh, my heart is pounding, my blood is quickening, I'm coming into sort of a trauma response. I'm coming into fight, flight, freeze, fawn. Fawn is a really interesting one if you haven't heard about that one. That's sort of the trauma response that's like, there's a scary dog coming, and it's snarling at you and you go, nice doggy, nice doggy. That's fawning. It's reducing the threat, right? But it's still a trauma response. It's still your fear doing the talking. Curiosity and fear can't really work together. If you are too afraid, that's your signal to, I need a break. And once you notice that about yourself, you're not going to be carried away by it, right? You can try to figure out what sort of choice and agency you want to take in that moment and stay grounded and say, okay, I'm going to take a break, or I'm going to name the emotion to this other person. You know what? Right now, I can tell I'm feeling upset. And if sometimes if you name that, it becomes data in your conversation. And the other person might go, oh gosh. And maybe they'll loop back and say, that thing I said, I didn't mean it that way. Right. Let's go back. So there's ways you can use your emotion and share it as data. That's your body talking to you and you listening. There's ways that you can take those signals and decide that you need to take your body out of this situation right now.
Yeah, thanks.
I feel like that brings up a good point because as a student, I feel like I'm always trying to write persuasive and argumentative essays. So sometimes I kind of feel like I'm trying to maybe win conversations when I really should be listening. How could we turn these almost casual dinner table chats, as you've put it, from competitions to conversations? And how do we know when to engage deeper or to actually step back?
Oh, great question. So first of all, every Thanksgiving, all the news outlets do the same kind of story. Here's how to have conversations with your family over the Thanksgiving dinner table. And that's fine. Okay, that's a cliche now, that's fine. But often, one piece that we get wrong is that the best way to have those conversations is not at that dinner table. Get the heck away from there. When everyone's around there and everyone's got their family roles, right? Sets of expectations, baggage that they carry in from other places, these things are gonna come up. It's okay for that to be a place where, for the most part, you're passing the turkey and talking about the football game or whatever it is that's been going on in your family. The best time, the best context to have a more difficult political conversation is one-on-one. So that's very, very paramount. Make it, if Uncle Bob is there at the table and you know that you and Uncle Bob probably disagree on this one thing, and just sitting here looking at Uncle Bob eat his mashed potatoes is making you upset. Things like this, right? You have a choice. After dinner, when everybody's cleaning their plates, maybe Uncle Bob and Uncle Marty are going out into the porch. Go out then and say, hey, Uncle Bob, do you have a minute? I'd love to talk to you about something. Pull him aside from Uncle Marty and state an intention. There's something I saw you post on Facebook that frankly kind of bothered me a bit. And I just wanted to hear more from you about it. Like, genuinely, I just want to hear more about what you think about this, because it's something that kind of matters to me. Could we chat about it? Like, maybe we can sit over there at the tables? Yeah, sure. That's where you have it. That's where you have it. So now, sometimes you're around that dinner table, and it's not up to you. Somebody brought it up. Okay, so then there's a couple of things to think about. I mentioned roles. There's family roles. There's also different roles that we play in these sorts of dynamics around tables when there's already relationships that sometimes get in the way. One role that people play in families is the sniper. You ever seen the sniper? The sniper's just like eating, and then goes like everywhere, every now and then just kind of like puts in a little poke. Just pew, 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 and then back in, right? There's the gladiator who's like looking for a fight. You guys see what was on Fox News last night? Did you see what was on MSNBC? Yeah, and like speaking louder than he has to make sure the whole table can hear. Like starting that fight. There's the defender, maybe this is you. The defender's like, gosh, Lillian always gets like beat up or over this one issue. I'm gonna side with Lillian. So before you know it, you just have all of these different roles and clashes going on. The role that is the one to try to take on is the engager. Not the peacemaker, not the can we all just stop? Sometimes that makes it worse. So the engager might look for a moment to say, Lillian, I know that matters. I know that matters a lot to you. Is there something that's, changed in the last year that sort of helped you think differently about it? Asks a curious question to bring the temperature down, to let someone know that they're in a place where they can be heard. Maybe Marty over here is like stewing. Marty can stew. Let's listen to Lillian for a bit. And there's ways to do that too. So it's paying attention to the roles, seeing what role you tend to play, if there's any patterns you want to disrupt. But overall, when to have these conversations, make sure they're contained. When it's one-on-one, people can explore more honestly without consequences from whoever might be listening and whatever judgments they think are coming to them for just being honest, exploring a perspective.
So I'm going to tell a little secret about myself. I've never interviewed like a best-selling book author. And so I've seen a lot of people do it on TV, right? So I wanted to like read your book and be like, I'm on the Today Show or something. So I read your book, most of it. And so what I think is really interesting is that we're in this forum right now that's called In the News. And one of the things you highlight in your book is how the news is essentially sort of like kind of this polarizing force. And it has become that way for a lot of reasons that you spend a lot of time talking about in the book. So I think it's kind of ironic that we're in the news, but then being in the news kind of puts us in this much more polarizing place. So how can we be in the news without like feeding our ideologies or widening our divide, right? So Fox, New York Times, you know, so like how can we really inhabit what this program is asking us to do, be in the news?
Yeah.
While in the times that we're in right now.
Yeah. So you're referring, I think, in part to the fact that we tend to be able to find news outlets that affirm already our own sentiments about the world. So all this research has shown that when we surround ourselves with people who share our instincts, we'll also share our blind spots. And in a splintered media ecosystem, that has ended up enhancing and amplifying the toxic divisions that are out there. Why? Because of gross misperceptions that we have about each other. So there's been this really compelling research that continues to this day that takes a look at how informed people are, not about news and events, but about other people's perspectives. And I was talking about this in the workshop. There's an organization called More in Common. Hugely recommend their newsletter, sign up. They have extraordinary research and they're on top of this. But they've coined what they call the perception gap, where across the political divide, we are misperceiving each other so much. There's 20 to 30 percentage point gaps between, let's say, what Republicans think Democrats think about open borders versus what Democrats actually think about open borders, or what, Democrats think Republicans think about free speech versus what Republicans actually think about free speech. So basically, part of what's been going on is there's been this obsession, I think, and rightly so, with misinformation about news and events. Here's what we're ignoring: misinformation about what's in people's hearts. The news is terrible at that. Terrible. Man, you can look at so many outlets that over time, because of the economics of the news, the attention economy and all these things, it just so happens that if we pull at your heartstrings, if we kind of get if we get you to react, if we get your emotions up and then you get carried away by your emotions, you're going to want to read an article that gives you ammo against the other side. That's the way you're going to want to read the article, right? So what I tell folks, because I get a lot of folks who tell me, look, like, I know you're into curiosity, great, I dig it intellectually, but I am not talking to someone on the other side of this issue or of that issue. I can't stomach it, I can't stand it. And I say, that's okay. That's okay. You can start being curious by being curious with yourself as you read an article from the opposing point of view. So here's my kind of like, I don't know, try this out. Here's my challenge. Next time you come across a headline for a widely held view on the other side that you really don't like, instead of clicking that article and reading it for ammo, gee, I know how awful these people are, look how stupid this is, blah, 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 blah. Instead of that, read the article asking yourself two questions. What are the deep down honest concerns that are informing this person's point of view? And then the second question, what is the strongest argument for their side? You're only talking to yourself. That's it. Nobody can judge you for the conversation you have with yourself, thank goodness. The integrity, what is it? Last sacred is the integrity of your own mind. One of my favorite quotes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Yes, you're talking with yourself. Go to the bright spots. Go to the dark spots. It's okay. Wrestle those things with yourself. And I've done this over and over again with headlines that kind of irk me, right? But I end up unwrapping even things like anger. Lots of columnists use anger to bring force to their arguments. And if you disagree with them, that seems mean and terrible and awful. There's this author named Valerie Kaur who says that anger is a force that protects that which is loved. Anger is a force that protects that which is loved. So I ask myself when I read an angry columnist, I go, what is this force trying to protect? And I can get very curious about that just as I read that article. And bit by bit, something may soften in my mind, all by myself, just exposed to this article. and I'll leave a little more opening for what I might be missing.
That's a great strategy. Thanks for sharing that.
Well, you studied why we're so divided now here in 2025. But if you zoom out historically, do you think that humans have always been this way? Or is our division equality unique to this age that we're currently living in?
Oh, yeah. I think that humans have always been this way, socially. What's unique to our era is how we communicate. Technology always advances these sorts of things. And I do think that the fingerprints that technology leaves on each era absolutely have to do with how we end up relating to each other because of the impacts on how we communicate. So what's that saying that a lie can go all the way around the world while the truth is still lacing up its shoes or something like that? So we know that that impacts these things. But people have always been somewhat wired to divide. So at the first part of my book, I talk about my answer to how we even got here to this toxically divided place. I sum it up with the acronym SOS, like a call for help, SOS. But it's sorting, othering, and siloing. So sorting is the natural human tendency to want to be around people who are like us, which is, by the way, how we make friendships in places like college. It's okay to want to be around people who are like us. The consequence is that you spend less time in kind of intimate, familiar contexts with people who are not like you. And therefore, less likely are you to understand them just in an organic level. Okay, so then there's othering. And othering is the very natural human tendency to want to put distance between like us and them, between you and anyone who's different. And research going back to like the 60s shows the difference doesn't have to be meaningful for people to subtly discriminate against each other. So studies have been showing this for a long, long time. My sort of silliest example is when I went to like the school yard to pick up my 10-year-old, and I realized, I found a parent. Oh, your daughter's also in 4th grade. That's so cool. Nice to meet you. What class is she in? Oh, she's in Phoebe's class. Oh, so she's not in Mary's class. Okay, got it. Us and them. We just, whatever it is, we'll just make those divides. And then there's siloing. And siloing is about the stories you hear and the stories you don't hear based on who you surround yourself with, and also the stories you hear generously and the stories you hear through layers and layers and layers of judgments based on who you surround yourself with, who is us versus them. So all together, I think that those three things are dynamics that have been with us all along. Now, here's what gives me hope, though, is that we are wired to divide in some ways. We are also wired to connect. In earlier versions of my workshop, I used to have groups of folks, pair off and talk to each other, and I would tell them, okay, you're asking questions, but you are not allowed to react to their answers. Not at all. And at the end, I would ask people like, okay, how many people actually were able to not react to the answers? And the answer was nobody. Like, you have to nod, you have to acknowledge, you have to smile, and not doing that is so inhuman. So if we put ourselves in the contexts where this natural desire to want to connect with somebody else turns on for us, our curiosity is going to be there too. And we'll be able to bridge those divides more easily. What's one place where that doesn't happen? The internet. The internet is a non-place that makes us into non-people. Smiles are contagious. Laughter. You can hear even in this conversation, every now and then there'll be a little tiny bit of laughter that just breaks the tension. And if you just saw this as a transcript, you wouldn't be able to see the tone and what's going on there. So we're wired to divide, but we're wired to connect. And that's what we have to hook onto.
I think we can turn to the audience now and see what questions we have.
Great.
Out in one more question.
Oh,
there,
well, we get the mic set up.
All
Sure.
right. So, okay,
Yeah.
I have a good one, Megan.
Okay.
Or do you have one?
Go ahead.
No.
Okay.
So one of the experiences I have sometime that I think is relevant here is, people know that I work at a college. And sometimes it's because I'm wearing my Kobe jacket,
Yeah.
But oftentimes when I've had interactions with students and talking to them about misconceptions they have about things like very biological topics like vaccines, right, which now is a very hot topic.
Yeah.
I wonder, how can we bridge divides when there's the sort of where you can share perspectives. I worry about sharing perspectives without sounding academic. yet they label,
yeah.
it's very easy to label all of us, and, and that are connected to institutions like Colby or any institution
Yes.
as academic. What, sort of this whole, like, I don't want to explain anybody how vaccines work.
Yeah.
But I kind of do, well, maybe I kind of do. So, yeah, I wonder, like how perceptions that people have about each other color the ways that we can interact.
That's right. So I've heard a relatable kind of anecdote from a lot of folks, right? That sometimes people want to send an article. Just read this article. Read this article. You'll see, or somebody is perceived as being an academic, so they're just gonna intellectualize me. They're gonna want to educate me. And what we have to be careful of with that is that people's political opinions are not ultimately just about facts and research and the kinds of things that academics do. They're about people's concerns, about society, about themselves, about their own lives. And no matter what degree somebody has, everyone is eligible for that conversation. So I do think it's really important that folks who are in what might be called like an expert place, right, be really, really careful not to accidentally use their expertise as a kind of disqualifier, as a way to shove someone else out of a conversation. That has to be super frustrating, because if you're an academic on a particular issue that's maddening right now, all you want to do is share the knowledge that for you adds up to a particular perspective. The harder thing to do that I think is really important to try to do is to reach to that person who might be skeptical or might be afraid that you're about to come at them with a bunch of stuff, and turn the question to them and say, like, what concerns you about vaccines right now?
Yeah.
I know that you're worried about it. Like, what worries you? What's concerning for you? Like, this thing happened to you. Can you tell me what that was like? Those sorts of questions, everyone is eligible for that conversation. We should not be shoving people out of that conversation. And those questions are so essential to our politics. So, yeah, we all have to know how to have that conversation.
Yeah, and it's turning the curiosity and making sure that it's flowing in both directions.
Exactly. I think that's everything.
Great. All righty.
Hi, my
Hey.
name's Winnie. I'm a sophomore art history and English major. And I'm super interested in your emphasis on curiosity as a way of bridging divides, even in the face of difficult conversations or maybe uncomfortable topics. So my question is, what is one everyday question you would encourage people to bring into their daily practice to build bridges and reinforce curiosity?
Yeah, so the big one is, how did you come to believe what you believe? How did you come to believe what you believe? Not why do you believe what you believe? So often when we encounter that kind of clash, we want to know why. And so we ask why. And why is a very curious question. I was taught as a journalist, the 5 W's, and why was always the one that got the most like, ta-da! Why is great when there's trust. But if there might be disagreement, suspicion that comes with that, then why can be very loaded. And it's like it puts people on the spot. It makes them feel like, I've got to defend myself. And this is exactly what happens. Oftentimes in kind of divisive contexts, you ask, why do you believe what you believe? It'll sound like an accusation. It'll make people defensive. And so what they'll do is not plumb their own depths to figure out why they believe what they believe and share it openly with you. Oh no. Instead, they will think about, what reasons have I heard others give that sound strong and confident and that will get this person off my case? And they'll go and grab those reasons, and they will put those reasons into the conversation. And then you might respond by going, those reasons are dumb. Here are my reasons, which are better reasons. And then since nobody's budged, because you're both trying to just defend yourselves, you're trying to win instead of explore, then you just repeat your reasons, but louder this time, which has no effect. And so then you do it again, and it's even louder, and you see where this is going. But if you ask, how did you come to believe what you believe? You're asking for somebody's story. And there are so many landmines you avoid by doing that. One including, fake news and truth, and what is truth? Everyone is the world's reigning expert on their own story. And so you're asking what path they walked to their view. And people are almost never asked this. They're taken a little off guard, right? Like they may want to tell you the reasons. No, I researched it. I saw the TV news. I have these reasons. Now you're asking me how I came to believe this? Well, gee, now I have to go into my own experience. And what's amazing is I remember having one conversation with a friend about guns. And this question came up from me, and he goes, well, there was that time I was mugged at gunpoint. And I was like, what? Wait, that sounds really relevant. And he hadn't brought that up because we were just up in the clouds of reasons. We were up in the clouds of intellect. But the experiences we've gone through shape our perspectives. And it's an extraordinary way when you hear someone else's experience. You know, I hear my friend talk about what it was like to be mugged at gunpoint. And I'm asking myself, whoa, where would that experience land me if it happened to me about guns? And might it be a different one, a different perspective than I have now? So try out that one. How did you come to believe what you believe? By the way, don't just ask other people, ask yourself. Ask yourself every opportunity you have. You'll know yourself better.
Hi, I'm Maya, and I'm a sophomore economics and French major. And in your work, you often tell people to go talk to those underrepresented in their life, but for many, their communities reflect the homogeneity surrounding them. And when physical proximity to diversity of thought is a barrier to conversation across viewpoints, how do you feel about curiosity taking place online? And do you see it as a viable space for open conversation?
Yeah. You know, as much as I rag on the internet, I'm on it because it helps me absolutely learn and connect across perspectives. So you're bringing up, if I heard you right, the circumstance where, well, lots of us live in more sorted communities that are more alike. And so sometimes reaching a certain degree of difference just can't happen in person. And so you go online, perhaps. And I do think that there's beautiful ways to do that. I really love subreddits, but I do. Subreddits have these incredible community dynamics where they each develop almost their own language about how to talk about the thing that's brought them together. And I have found subreddits to be an amazing way to understand subcultures that I'm not a part of. And all I have to do is just go and listen. Just go and listen and spend time in that community. And that's really cool. That's kind of amazing. It's sort of a gift of technology that any of us can even do that. I do think that, to quote my friend Angel Eduardo, social media is the boss level of discourse, meaning like in a video game, it's like that's the big bad boss, right? If you're in natural conversation and you can use your tone and other ways to communicate good faith engagement, that's great. But on social media, or even on text, if somebody is reading what you are saying, what you're texting them, but you guys are in a bit of a conflict, they will read what you wrote on TikTok or whatever, or on Instagram. They will read what you wrote in the voice they imagine you having. And because they're mad at you, or they think you're mad at them, they're gonna imagine a mean voice, which is not the voice you used, right? So in other words, if you want to engage online, great, you can. You just need to be even more skilled at words. You have to have words do the work that all these other parts of an embodied conversation do. So because I can't smile through my tweet, I have to use words some other way of explaining I mean well. So you'll have to do that. And a lot of folks skip that, and they say exactly what they would have said out loud, but when they said it out loud, they had a smile on their face or whatever. They put it online, and people who disagree with them just think they're being hostile. So it takes that higher level of skill, but you can do it.
All right, group talk, go.
Snap, snap. Up here in the
I'm going to
front.
stand and stretch while we wait. Take a
Hi,
lap
my
around the
name's-
chair. Hello.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Quick stretch.
No, don't mind
All
me.
right.
This is just what I do.
Hi, my name is Daksh. I'm a senior here at Colby. I'm an environmental policy and government double major.
Cool.
I guess I find myself in these conversations all the time, whether it's about politics, whether it's about the news, anything. And I think I'm left wondering, how do you know when you've reached a point in a conversation when it's no longer productive? And what are the signs that should tell you to stop pushing, stop going forward, and maybe take a pause?
Yeah, there's many categories of that. I'll start with something sort of overreaching, which is that heat in a conversation is good. Some people want to leave when there's heat. Heat in a conversation is good. It's the friction of different perspectives colliding with each other. It's how we sharpen ourselves. This is okay. Heat in a conversation is good. The question is, are you cooking something or are you burning something? So, that's not very specific, but I'll try to bring it down. You could be, as me and my parents do all the time and just did last week, talking about free speech and all these things, you could be cooking up kind of understanding, right? You could be sensing that because they're colliding with your idea and you're there to receive that collision, okay, you're wrestling with that right now, and now it seems like there's a chemical reaction with your opinions and you're going, okay, maybe I never thought of it that way. Let me see what's going on, right? And vice versa. That's special. That's awesome. Like, do more of that, right? Burning something could be, I feel like my dignity is being burned. I feel like I'm burning this relationship, maybe because my fire is coming out in ways that it can't be quite managed right now, or maybe their fire is coming toward me. Maybe you've gotten to that awful point where people attack each other's character instead of the idea, and that's burning. Maybe you're doing it. Maybe you think you're not doing it, but it's coming off condescending to the other person. Maybe you've gotten, so that's one category, is about the heat. There was this one time I was talking with my mom, and we were gearing up for another political disagreement. This was some years ago. And I just saw her all of a sudden, like I was ready to go. And I saw her just slump in her chair. And she said in Spanish, like, Moni, no, ya no puedo, por favor, no. Like, I can't do this. And I was like, why? And she said, like, you're too good a communicator. You're too good with your rhetoric. You've read all this news that I didn't read. And I'm already like, white flag. I don't want to do this. So that's a more personal example that sometimes I can be overbearing and I can kind of throw my weight around and I can forget. So I sort of burn her own energy to want to represent herself fully to me. I burn my capacity to receive her as she is. When I do that, when I get too hopped up and excited, right? So I just try to remind myself that we're all human, we all have our opinions, and we're all worth hearing. We're all worth hearing out. So I have to be careful that I'm not speaking too much. And I shut up and let someone else have a turn.
Oh, here in the front. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Anish. I'm a bio-neuro major, senior here. I was this summer having a conversation with a family friend of mine, and we had very opposing political views. How would you approach that conversation without having the mentality of being, I'm right and they're wrong, or making it just super binary in that way?
Yeah. So, us bridge builders as a class of people always love saying, don't try to change each other's minds. That's not helpful. Try to understand. But I think one thing that we don't acknowledge often enough is we all want to change each other's minds, and that is not a bad thing. Wanting to persuade other people of ideas that we find to be more correct is not something that we need to be tamping down. I think it's something that we need to just be doing more skillfully. And understanding that persuasion can't possibly work without understanding. One of the principles behind that is that people can only hear when they are heard. So if someone feels that you're not hearing them and you're just there to change them, they're not going to feel respected by you. They're not going to feel like you even see them. You don't see them. Or maybe they think you just see a caricature. You see a stereotype. Maybe I don't even think these things you think I think, right? And you're in here trying to change me or trying to argue your point, but you haven't spent enough time hearing me out on how I think about things. So there's this wonderful book called How Minds Change by David McRaney. Hugely recommend. Like David, his work, the book, it's the leading stuff on how persuasion works. And one of the key takeaways from that book for me was all persuasion is self-persuasion. And one of the ways I translate this is, I think our language is broken about this. When we say like, You changed my mind. I changed your mind. Impossible. That's not how it works. Only I can change my mind. And Carol, only you can change your mind. That's it. And the only way I'm going to change my mind is if, because of something about you, is if something that you said leads me to edit a story I'm telling myself about my relationship to an issue in such a way that it points me to a different conclusion. That's how I change my mind. But that means I need to be in a place to receive what you're telling me. And if I hear you speaking in a way that doesn't listen to me, doesn't receive who I am, seems to think I'm bad or shaming me for what I believe, or just wants to change me, I am not going to be receptive to anything you say in a way that could lead me to edit my own story about an issue that I tell myself. So you see what I mean? Like, it's okay to want to persuade. It's just that understanding and calibrating with somebody else is a prerequisite, and we keep skipping it.
So this summer before Charlie Kirk's assassination, I learned really shocking data, which is that 2.1% of Democrats supported politically driven murder, while only 1.8% of Republicans supported politically motivated murder, which are just really, really small numbers. In contrast, an interesting fact is that 45.2% of Democrats think the other side support murder, while 42%.
42. I just saw the same data.
That's an amazing article.
Isn't it?
Yes. Well, this story, 42% of Republicans thinks that the other side supported political driven murder.
Right.
And just the other day, I think it was yesterday, I saw a poster by Kobe Young Republicans that was just right next to the poster of Kobe Young Democrats, which says that what is it? I'm sorry. It might not be accurate because my memory is blurred.
I'm already super impressed that you were able to give all those numbers like super accurately a minute ago, so you're good.
But yeah, basically it says you should not be killed for having an opinion.
Right.
Which is definitely is not an accurate depiction of what most Democrats think about politically driven murder.
Yeah.
So, like, in light of like the recent political violence, like, what do you think is a way for us, to bridge this like huge gap and division between the cognitive malicious speculation between and real facts?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. You're nailing it. These misperceptions that we have, this perception gap, even about political violence, it's remarkable how influential that is to everything else. Rob Willer, I think he's at Stanford, is one of the leading polarization researchers, and anyway, he worked on this giant project with a lot of folks, and they were looking at all the interventions that have a real impact on lessening support or perceived support, really lessening support for political violence. The number one thing that has the most impact is correcting misperceptions across the divide. It's the number one thing. How do we do that? How do we correct misperceptions across the divide? So we talked a little bit about the media. Unfortunately, the signals there and how they tend to reach us and the spaces that we tend to kind of custom build around our own preferences, not necessarily a great place for us to correct our misperceptions. It's not necessarily like news outlets are saying 45% of Democrats support partisan murder, didn't you know? But the way that they write, the way that Republican-leaning outlets or Democratic-leaning outlets write about the other side is so full of judgment, is so full of condescension, and its opinion and commentary is way more popular online than news. The New York Times, not that long ago, created a whole new category called analysis. If you go to the top of their website on your phone or whatever, oftentimes the top 1, 2, or 3 stories are labeled analysis. They've created this new category between news and opinion because their opinion columns are always the most popular. People want to hear their feelings echoed, and their opinions affirmed. So But I take a lot of heart from that data that it's about correcting the misperceptions. That's the most important thing. And I don't see how we do that without getting closer to folks who disagree with us. I don't see how we do that any other way right now. We can't wait for the media to fix it or fix their own dynamics. We can't wait for politicians to do it either. We have to start ourselves. So I think that's the main thing. But everything you were saying is like absolute gold. Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, the data on misconceptions about learning, pretty much suggests that some really jarring information has to come in before the mental model that you have is something that, first of all, you're willing to self-criticize. And then second of all, that you're willing to actually change. And again, that whole learning of that, and it's all going on in your head. No one else can do that for you. But if we never are experiencing that information that might, if we're not talking to a Democrat or a Republican about their perceptions regarding something like this, your model just is like totally intact.
Exactly. Yeah. David McGraney has another takeaway from his book on persuasion. Our fear of social death is greater than our fear of actual death. So the more attached your sense of self is to certain narratives, the harder it will be for you to kind of, when necessary, peel yourself away from them to question them. It'll be really hard. It'll feel like you're threatening yourself. And we're definitely in that point too.
Hi, thank you for being here. I'm Kate, I'm a sophomore here. I'm thinking about how politics is deeply personal, and like you said, it's really about people's fundamental concerns, and it comes from, how did we create these opinions? And I'm wondering, when we're having these conversations, and it seems that someone may have taken something that we said as a personal attack, how do we sort of diffuse that situation, or more preemptively, how do we avoid making those statements that could come across that way? And how do we how do we diffuse that situation, get back on track to having a more productive conversation without sort of traveling into that like academic realm that we were talking about?
Yeah, oh wow. I do think a key skill is the repair. So you talked about preemptively, how do you avoid those moments? But I think even more important was your first thing, which is once they happen, what do we do to get back on track? And so this to me speaks of the cycle of rupture and repair. Rupture and repair. Humanity has relied on this cycle forever. And it has felt like in the last X number of years, we have lost faith in this cycle. People have become so afraid that they will rupture that they would rather not even try to say what they want to say, to be honest about their opinion, to ask that question. They would rather just not. And I think in part it's because we're so afraid of hurting other people. We're terrified of that. We're so afraid we're going to cause harm. We want to be good, and so we'll stay quiet, right? But if we practice repair, right? If we spend time thinking about that, like if you really think about it, we're a democratic republic, right? Like founded on the ideals that we ought to be able to disagree and that we can build a great society that way. There is no way we can do that without hurting each other sometimes. We're gonna do it. You can't be honest about your opinions and put them into a forum where all those ideas cycle without doing that sometimes. So I just think that that is the most important skill. How do you repair? Not how do you avoid having to repair. No. Go ahead and take risks and learn how to repair. Okay, so how do you repair? There's wonderful, research and writing about apologies and how you do apologies well. It takes humility. It takes actually being able to say the words, I was wrong. Honestly, like every now and then, just go to the mirror when no one else is around, look in the mirror at yourself, and without smirking, take it seriously and look at yourself, say, I was wrong. And don't be sheepish about it. Don't look at yourself and say, I'm terrible. No. Or think I'm terrible as you say I was wrong. Think I'm strong. I was wrong. It's so empowering. So you can bring that into a conversation and there is no shame. If you think you said something that came out wrong, then say, if you think that actually something that you really do regret came out of you, apologize. Like, absolutely. I'm sorry I said that. What I meant was this, I should have said that. And then, if you can, end an apology with a commitment. Next time, I'm going to be more careful about this. You could even offer an invitation. Please keep me honest about that commitment. I don't want to hurt you. Please let me know. So there's ways to do this. It's just we're steeped in this culture that tells us that when we're wrong, we're weak. And it's such bullshit. So that's the way we repair.
Alrighty. Thank you. Allison?
Hi, Monica. My name is Claire. Thanks so much for coming to Colby tonight. I wanted to ask a question about vulnerability because I think that's the flip side of curiosity. And I've really appreciated how you've encouraged us to ask questions, especially with that how question instead of why. It can be a little easier to approach. But when we're asking someone a lot of questions, we don't want to feel like we're interviewing them. So we also need to share some things about ourselves.
Yes.
How do we walk that line of being vulnerable and curious at the same time so that we would strike a good balance of, both sharing things that are important to us, but also, of course, listening to things that are important to others?
Yeah. I think that vulnerability is such a key to getting people past pretension and kind of fake niceties. As a journalist, when I did my interviews, I would do so often exactly what you say. I would try really hard not to interview people, but to have a conversation. And so what that would mean is if I'm about to ask a question, if I want to know something about them that is more vulnerable, I want to make it easier for them to open up to me. How do I do that? By opening up to them. And so I'll say, when I'm with my parents or when I'm with my community, like this thing happened to me once and then I felt this way. And this happened to you. How did that feel for you? And if I've primed them with a sense of, you and I are not that different, we're both human, I get that. I'm not here putting you on the spot. I get it. It's that there's a certain level people can reach of vulnerability where we're all just being real, for crying out loud. I am most allergic to spaces where human beings are not being real. And usually it takes somebody bursting the pretend bubble. I was just reading a book by the Dalai Lama where he was saying that he often wishes when he's in events with other religious leaders that something goes wrong. Because if something goes wrong with the setup or somebody spills the fruit bowl or the chair is broken that the big archbishop is sitting on, at least they'll all get off their high horses about being so darn superior and formal about everything. It's none of us are perfect. We're all dead wrong about something. We just don't know what it is. So if we're just human about that, let's just put it out there. I think it's about that. It's understanding that people feel a lot safer going to certain levels if you come there with them. And in fact, I heard this quote the other day that was really inspiring to me, and it said, what if success was about how much safety people felt in your presence? What if we measured success by how much safety people feel in our presence? And that really spoke to me. Whoa, how could I be someone that other people want to be fully themselves around? What would that mean? What would that look like? What would I have to be like? And I certainly couldn't be superior and perfect. I'd have to be very flawed like I am, and very real like I am.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Ava. I'm a junior and an English and education major, and I'm planning on becoming an educator. And, the classroom is a classically apolitical environment, but, I really want to be able to have meaningful conversations about the world with my students and kind of lift up their perspectives. But I know that sometimes tensions can arise in those kinds of environments. And I was just wondering if you have any strategies, as a facilitator of these conversations, how to deal with that.
Yeah, thank you. I do think it's one of the most important spaces to be able to create those containers, create containers for everyone to feel like they can share their honest opinion in a classroom. Like that can be tough. There's a lot of passions, and passions often lead to resistance toward the opposite passion. What do you do when that comes up? There's a professor at a college in Massachusetts that shared a really interesting story that I'll pass on to you. So she's a sociology professor, and she said that over the years she's noticed that conversations about tough topics sociologically, that used to be easy to spark in her classroom became really hard. And students ended up kind of shutting down. And so she decided one semester to start something new that she's kept up because it's worked really well. So she handed out these notebooks to everybody, and she reserves the last 5 to 10 minutes of every discussion class, it's a discussion-oriented class, for basically everyone to privately, in their notebooks, write, how that discussion went, if there was anything that they thought was missing from the discussion, how they thought, the views sort of flowed, and if their own views had kind of a home in what was going on. So she starts this out. The class watches a movie about Appalachia, and the class discussion is all about race. And race is a big theme in that movie, and the class discussion was robust. She gets the notebooks, because these notebooks are for her. She gets the notebooks, she reads through them, and there's one student who's from Appalachia who's going, the discussion on race was great, but we didn't talk at all about poverty and class. And I'm from there, and it's huge. And I feel like we missed that utterly, but I didn't feel like I could say anything. So the next class, the professor had planned to move on to something different, but she opened class by saying, by the way, thank you as always for your feedback in the notebooks, and thank you to those of you, she didn't say the one, right? Those of you who pointed out that we missed a whole part of the story of Appalachia that was in that movie. So today we're going to do more of that discussion. And there we go. And that student was able to kind of kick things off, right? So what that's about, the larger principle that's about is break up the classroom into different things. The classroom is in a setting we call plenary. And plenary is everybody together, like what we're doing right now. This is plenary, right? Classes that can use different contexts. Now we've got plenary, but now we're going to break the class up into small groups. In small groups, it's more likely that people can be heard. People can hear only when they're heard, and when people are heard, So in other words, there's like a stepladder you can use where people might do like a private reflection, then they go into pairs or whatever, or small groups or whatever, and they share there. And by the time you're back in plenary, the quieter students are going to be safer raising their hand, right? The students who had the minority opinion are going to be safer raising their hands, because if you're the minority opinion in a class of 50, or you're the minority opinion in a group of 3, it's very different, right? And then the minority opinion will speak to the group of 3, and then they'll feel safer speaking to the group of 50. So you actually elevate those perspectives and let them circulate more.
Last time I spoke too loud into this mic. So my name is Brendan. I am a German Studies and Government double major. And my question has to do with speech in the way, like I often talk with people and they'll say, I'd like to talk to people who disagree with me, but they don't affirm my existence as equally valuable or something like that.
Right.
And I always say, like, we can't get anywhere if we don't talk with each other, but that's easy for me as a white guy to say, where people's opinions maybe don't affect me as directly. So I'm wondering what you say to that critique of I can't speak to somebody, or I can't try to find common ground with somebody who doesn't acknowledge me in the same way.
Right. Yeah, no, this is maybe the hardest question. How do I engage with someone who thinks I shouldn't exist? What does that mean? What are the boundaries there? So the first thing I'll say is, as much as, again, bridge builders like me as a class would really love all of you to, to find your edge and push it, right? And sometimes it sounds like what we're saying is everyone's got to talk to every type of person all the time. And that's just not true. For all of us, there's going to be a particular, set of issues, set of perspectives around which I can't have that conversation, right? Like a friend of mine has a child who's trans. she's not really in a place where she wants to have that robust disagreement about something that precious to her, right? As the well-being of her child, like she's got her own opinions, and that's going to be that for a while. I do think that there are dilemmas here, and they're difficult to look at in the face. But one way that I would describe one of those dilemmas is that there is a severe tension between being safe and being seen. So when I talk about curiosity, my ultimate mission is to build a world that sees itself. In a world that sees itself, nobody's existence is categorically denied. We see each other. We see each other as we actually are. I believe that it is almost always true that groups that tend to be kind of, on the regular unseen, there's tons of misperceptions and misunderstandings, like a ton of them, right? That aren't able to be corrected for a bunch of reasons. Those stories aren't circulating. So there's a tension between being safe and being seen. So one school of thought says people who hold certain identities, all of them need to go all the way toward being safe all the time, which means out of sight, not engaging with anyone who disagrees with them at all the time. And here's why I reject that school of thought. I reject that school of thought because I know of so many examples of folks who hold identities and perspectives where others might say, wait, you're engaging with someone who denies your own existence. And yet they do it anyway. So I'll give you a couple examples because this is a heady topic. Daryl Davis, have you all heard of Daryl Davis? He's kind of a legend. He's a black blues musician who was playing a gig, and when the gig was over, this table of card-carrying white supremacists, like actual Ku Klux Klan, started saying a bunch of crap, like absolutely, utterly racist crap. And instead of leaving or yelling at them, like nobody would have blamed him for that, and in fact, that was probably the most logical thing to do, he did something crazy and foolish and stupid. He sat down with them. I am not saying that this is something people ought to do. Let me be super clear. The story I'm telling is about what's possible, not what's practical. But fast forward years, and Daryl Davis has a collection of 200 robes from former Ku Klux Klan members who, in the process of getting to know him, denied their hateful beliefs, like disowned them. He has that collection of robes. Like, his story is remarkable. The thing that he says motivated him, and again, I am not condoning this, don't try this at home. The thing that motivated him, he says, was this radically curious question that he held in his heart. And the question was, how can you hate me if you don't even know me? And if you kind of repeat that question to yourself enough times, it starts to make sense that there is a logical absurdity to hate when you don't know someone. How can you hate me if you don't even know me? Somehow Daryl got it in his head that he just didn't believe it. And so he just sat there and asked a bunch of questions. And I don't know, look, this starts to get into spiritual stuff, but hate's weird. Hate's weird. And in my experience, sometimes if someone who feels safe enough, not someone who doesn't feel safe enough, but if someone who feels safe enough approaches the hate in another person and inquires into it, the hate loses its support and it falls down dead because it didn't have anything holding it up to begin with, right? Because we're living in delusions and misperceptions about each other all the time. So I'm afraid that if we tell ourselves we all must be safe all the time, and we must completely disown and put total distance between us and anyone we deem hateful or holding any hateful idea, then I have no way, like, how is that hate ever going to be witnessed enough to wither? I don't know how that happens. I don't think it's the responsibility of the people who feel the most on target. Absolutely not, no. But I do know that people who carry their experiences with them carry a lot of power. And so one of my answers, and I'm going on a long time, so I'll just finish with this. I think the most powerful way to argue against someone who thinks you shouldn't exist is merely to continue to exist in their presence. You don't even have to say a word. You stand proud as who you are, and don't hide. Don't feel pressure that you have to go and argue. You don't. You shouldn't have to argue for your own existence. We have to deal with each other in this country. We just have to.
That was a great way to end. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for all your wonderful questions. And as we indicated at the beginning, we're going to take a short break, and then Monica is going to do the more hands-on interactive workshop. And we hope you stay, because we will be bringing out the cannolis. But I think the real prize is more time with Monica. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carol.
Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you. You're great.